Thanks so much for joining us. Today on Pod Bites, we're talking about museums and the roles that they play within our communities and really the world in regard to shaping and influencing thinking and action in social, cultural, and political arenas. I am very excited to be joined today on Pod Bites by John Swaine. He is the CEO of the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, which is located in Greensboro, North Carolina. It is housed in the F.W. Woolworth Building, which is where four college students on February 1st of 1960 staged a sit-in protest about segregation in the South. That was what sparked a movement in other segregated states. Thank you so much for joining me, John.
Thank you for having me today.
I appreciate it. You know, I grew up in Greensboro, so I'm very familiar with the center and the museum, its rich history, and the exhibits that happen there. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your feeling as the head of the center and museum during this moment in history, particularly after Kamala Harris became the first woman, the first Black and South Asian person to be elected vice president of our country as the center's CEO. And what is your feeling about that? What are your thoughts about that? I'm starting our timer now.
You know, I think about Kamala Harris becoming the first African-American president and South Asian.
Yes.
The same as I thought of President Obama becoming the first African-American president. I am glad to see it, but I'm not going to be too overjoyed about it because this museum represents civil and human rights for all people, eliminating barriers for all people, and focusing more on the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So we don't want to celebrate too much. I understand the celebration, but we don't want to celebrate too much as if it's just going to be a one-off and the first time this and the first time that. But how do we open up opportunities so that they are commonplace? I tend to have grown up in an environment where the sky was the limit. And all I ever knew was go where I wanted to go, do what I wanted to do, and just achieve. So I'm quite proud of Kamala Harris for her endurance. But I want to think in terms of it as this is who we are. This is what Dr. Martin Luther King talked about when he said that one day people will be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin.
Okay. Well, we all know those words very well.
Absolutely.
And the reason I really wanted to do this interview is to talk about really what the museum means to the community at large during this time. During a time where there is a lot of political change that's going on. We've had a lot of events that have been sparking some anger in our country. And I just wanted to talk about that, the role and the changing and evolving role of the museum in the community. What is your take on that? Where is the museum in today's time?
I've been quite impressed by what we have seen as the change in this museum and in other museums. I'm seeing more and more of our European brothers and sisters visiting museums like this, where they once thought that it was all about and all for the African-American citizen, when in essence they come in and they start learning that we are knocking down barriers for all people. And the thing that I hear over and over and over from those parents is I don't want my child to think that what they are seeing is normal. So museums have a critical role in educating the society and causing them to think very differently. Mm-hmm. So when you come to the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, we are far less about entertainment. We are about ideas. How do we bring our citizens together and get them to think very differently about the world that we live in? And that's what we're trying to achieve here, is we're opening up opportunities for everyone, and we want them to feel at home here. They're going to be uncomfortable, but they'll be at home here.
Now, do you feel like the museum is influencing thought of others, or others tend to influence museums? I know your museum, as we discussed a little while ago, is about exhibit and education, so you don't have different collections coming in. But what is your mindset on that? Is the museum doing the influencing, or is culture influence the museum? Museums overall.
I really think it's a combination of both. Most museums, they have their own vision and missions and agendas that they're wanting to achieve. But the outside community also steps in and says, these are things that we want to see in the museum. Here's how we want to volunteer with the museum. Here are our ideas about our national treasure. So I've always been open to new ways of looking at things and considering things. And I try to reach out and bring in scholarly and knowledgeable professionals. The last thing you want to do is put someone before a captive audience with personal ideas opposed to folks who have studied and can help change a community and change the way it's thinking.
And as you're thinking of the different programs that you do, because I'm on the mailing list, like I said, I'm from Greensboro, so I'm very interested in what the center and museum is doing. And so there are lots of programs that bring in speakers. You have different story times. You have, how do you decide those sorts of things, and how do you know that it is making the impact that you hope it is within the community?
Well, my background is that of a financial executive and a managerial person. Mm-hmm. So I've always known to look into the community and find people who are quite interesting and interested in helping to build a community. And when I say community, I'm not just looking at what does the Black community want? What does the Jewish community want? I'm talking about community. It takes all of us in the community to bring about these changes. So often I will get communications from some of our larger corporations, and their employees are looking at volunteering with the museum. So I'll throw out a project. I'll sit down with them, I'll talk through it, and say, here's something that we can do together. I like doing things with the community because the community, we need their input. And usually what comes out of that is something that's quite exciting and invigorating. I don't want them to just think of my ideas, or else it would just be mathematics. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at interesting ideas from the community, and that's how we have been able to start shifting the paradigm on our side to bring in an interesting group of people.
Now, the country is, of course, going through some healing. We all have to admit that, or needs to go through some healing. So how do you manage that? I know that you're talking about inclusion, and that's what it sounds like the administration is talking about for the country. Mm-hmm. I know that folks are talking about what they want to see as far as racial disparities decreasing and that sort of thing. How does one do that and have people, like you said, come to the museum feeling comfortable and having very uncomfortable, potentially, conversations about things that have to be maybe righted?
Well, it comes back to a common understanding. That's where we have to start. Fortunately for this museum, we have a principal scholar, Dr. Will Harris from the University of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And I brought him on board to lead us in our understanding of the U.S. Constitution. What is it that we should expect from the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, as it's so closely aligned with our mission and vision here at the museum? Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people find it quite rigorous, but that's what we want. We want people to open themselves up to really thinking. Just this morning, I was listening to an interview, and folks were talking about the Constitution of the United States. And the reason that people did not understand it, they weren't sure of what's in the U.S. Constitution. So when we talk about common ground and starting at a base of knowledge and moving forward, that's what we want to achieve with our center part of the museum. Common knowledge. This is very important.
Okay, and common knowledge coming from potentially folks who have not had that experience together. So that's the goal then, to bring people together to gain common knowledge from one another.
That is correct.
In order to move.
It's quite interesting the quality of people that we attract to the museum. And they come in and say, hey, I had no idea that you conducted programs like this on the U.S. Constitution, programs on people in Saudi Arabia and other places around the country. We try to open up this institution to everyone and to their base of knowledge, because folks often contribute a lot. And you'll find that in a community like Greensboro, there are people who are well-traveled, well-read, and studied, very knowledgeable. And it only takes a small spark to pull those people together to start changing the community for the best.
Okay, I have less than a minute. I know that's not fair, but I'm going to ask you this last question. Such a great conversation. Tell me, if you could, in a nutshell, what is the plan, the ongoing plan of the museum and center, as far as where you see yourself in 2 years, 4 years? Where do you see the museum going?
In the next 2 to 4 years, I hope the museum is going to be quite instrumental in helping to rebuild our country and helping to build it better. As I said, we are an educational resource center, and we're receiving requests from all across the country for people who are wanting to tour this museum. And now that we have virtual tours in place, we're able to reach places far beyond Greensboro and teach them about nonviolent social disobedience. So we are a growing institution, and we're going to keep moving in that direction.
Okay, well, that is our time right there. There goes our timer. I really appreciate your time, John. That was John Swaine, as we said. He is the CEO of the International Civil Rights Center and Museum in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I just wanted to throw out a couple of what we call bites that are tidbits that we want people to take away with them that you talked about. You talked about that you wanted to knock down barriers for all groups, that was the goal of the center and museum. Also, to educate society and cause them to think differently. And you really talked about the whole community coming together and having a common understanding of where to go. So they need to start there and then move forward. Is that pretty much where we are?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And thank you for the invitation today.
Oh, thank you so much, John. I appreciate your time. And we appreciate you all for coming and listening. We're going to have John's contact information included. And of course, we are going to have another episode of Pod Bites next week. So be sure to join us then. Until that time, have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.